I'm Tashi and welcome to my home. In this video, we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to make this gorgeous handbag just in time for all of your upcoming holiday parties. You can find the written pattern in the description of this video, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to leave a comment below and I will return your comment as soon as I am able. Kevin, are you ready to teach them how to crochet?
I love yarn. I love yarn. I love yarn. I love yarn.
Okay, let's talk about the supplies that we're going to need in order to create this luxurious bag. First of all, the yarn that I'm going to be using is this Yarn Bee Uber Luxe yarn. It is a super bulky size 6-weight yarn. And if you take a close look at it, you can see that it is just kind of twisted together. So if you don't have access to this yarn, I personally got this at my local Hobby Lobby. But if it's not something that's accessible to you, another alternative is that you can hold 2 strands of bulky yarn together and it'll produce somewhat of the same effect. If you're going to do that option, I would recommend using a really kind of shiny yarn. So I personally prefer velvet yarn. Bernat makes a really great velvet yarn, as does Juicy Couture, that I think would both look amazing with this project. So make sure you have enough yarn. We are going to use the entire skein of this Uber Luxe, which is 42 yards. You're also going to want a secondary ball of yarn in just a regular weight 4. You could also use string or embroidery floss. This is just to sew on our buttons and our clasp. And so you want to make sure that it is the same color as the yarn that you have or something close to it. Not that you're really going to see it in the end, so it doesn't really matter, but just for the sake of kind of hiding it as much as possible. Today we're going to be working with a 10mm crochet hook, so make sure you have a 10mm crochet hook on hand. You're also probably going to want 2 different sizes of needles. So I use this large plastic needle for sewing the sides of my purse together. So you want something with an opening big enough to fit your purse yarn through, and since this is really thick, that's why I have this really thick needle with a larger opening. And then this smaller needle I am going to use to sew on my button details. And speaking of button details, you're going to want these. First of all, you're going to want some bling. Now, it's completely up to you whether you use just one button as a single bling, or if you're feeling extra glamorous, you could also decide to put lots of bling on your purse. The buttons on the outside of the purse that everybody's going to see are purely ornamental. They don't actually help to secure or close your purse, because we are going to use these snap together buttons in order to help our purse stay closed. So you're also going to want one of those, and they typically come in a 4-pack that looks something like this. So that's what you're gonna wanna look for at your craft store. I got these at Hobby Lobby, but I know Joann's also has them. I'm sure any of your craft stores or Sewing Notion stores will have them in stock as well. Finally, you're gonna want 2 other things that you probably already have laying around your house. One is a pair of scissors, and the last thing you'll need is a lighter. Now, the lighter may seem odd, but I'll explain its use when we get a little further along in our project. It is optional, so it's not a necessity, but it does help to give your bag a really nice finish. So again, we'll get to this a little bit later on, but those are all of the tools that you're going to want to make sure that you have ready to go. And once you have your supplies gathered, we will go ahead and get started with our tutorial. For now, we're going to go ahead and set most of these items off to the side. The only thing that you're going to need to start is your crochet hook and the main color yarn for your bag. So go ahead and find the end of your yarn strand on your skein of yarn for your bag. We're going to want to leave about a 12-inch tail before we make a slip knot. If you don't know how to make a slip knot, the easiest way to do it is just to hold the yarn in your hand like this, grab it with your thumb, make an X over the palm of your hand, flip. Then I like to grab the other piece of yarn with my thumb. So here we have 2 parallel lines. On the back, we have an X. Grab your hook, go under the first strand on the top of your hand, and hook and pull through that second strand. Now, as I'm pulling this yarn off, I am still holding on securely to both ends with my thumb. So when I pull it off of my hand, it will create this knot. Then all I have to do is pull it tight, and there you have a slip knot that can loosen or tighten depending on the side of the yarn that you pull. Once you have your slip knot made, we're going to start with our foundational chain for our purse. You want to make sure that your chains are pretty loose. We don't want to get them too tight, otherwise the bag is going to be uneven at the end. So we're going to start by chaining 13. To chain, all you do is yarn over and pull through the loop on your hook. Yarn over, pull through the loop on your hook. So we're going to do that until we get to a total of 12. So that was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and you may have heard me say 2 different numbers, 12 and 13. So the reason why, our bag is actually going to be 12 stitches across, but at the end of every row, we're going to do 1 extra chain. So we have 12 chains here, but we need 1 extra 13 as our turning chain, because we're never going to be stitching into that first chain next to our hook. Now we will go ahead and start with the first row. This entire bag is made of half double crochets. So to do a half double crochet, what you're going to do is you're going to yarn over, and we're going to go through the second loop from our hook. So we'll always ignore this first one that's directly next to our hook. First of all, it's kind of hard to get into anyways, so you don't really want to go in that one. So this will always be the loop that we're working into. So after we yarn over for our half double crochet, we'll stick our hook through that loop. We'll pull up a loop. So you should have 3 total loops on your hook. Then we'll yarn over and we'll pull through all 3. And that's how you do a half double crochet. We're going to do that in every chain until we get to the end of the row. So I'll show you one more time. We'll be working into this next chain right here. If you kind of stretch your yarn out, then you can kind of see where the holes are for each of the chains. So again, we'll yarn over, stick our hook through that loop, pull up a loop. So we'll have 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 3. So we'll just continue doing these half double crochets all the way down. And again, you should have a total of 12 half double crochets when you reach the end of your row. I will finish my row and meet you at the end. 11 and 12. Now the nice thing about this bag is it's very forgiving. If you want to count your stitches, all you have to do is turn your work up so that you can see these little V's that appear, and then you just count the number of V's that you have. So I like to start from my hook and kind of count backwards. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and this little guy hiding right here is 12. But if you want your bag to be smaller or larger, you can of course chain less or more in order to make it the size that you prefer. Now, like I said earlier, we've reached the end of our round, and at the end of every single round, we're going to chain 1. So we'll take our hook and we will yarn over and pull through. That's a chain 1, and then we will turn our work and we're going to be working back the other way. Now we're still going to be doing half double crochets, but typically when we do half double crochets, we go into the stitch that is right there and has a very clear opening for us. However, to make this bag more tightly woven together and so that we don't have holes for our things to fall through, we're going to be working through the posts of each stitch. So if you kind of pull your work apart, you're going to see that there are these posts in between each of the places where we would normally crochet. On either side of the post where my fingers are, you'll see that there are holes there. That is where we're going to be crocheting into. So instead of the typical spot right here under our V, we're going to go down and crochet right next to the post. So again, we'll do a half double crochet, we'll yarn over, and then you can kind of pull your work apart, look for where that post is, and then we'll go into that first space next to the post, pull up a loop. So we have 3 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. Again, we'll go on the other side of the post now. So yarn over through the other side of that post, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through all 3. And again, you can keep kind of going down, you'll find the post, find where your next spot is, yarn over, through the side of the post, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. So this is going to make it so that your work is really tightly woven together and doesn't have a lot of gaps or spaces, which is what we want for this bag. It's going to be a nice, really dense bag that you're not going to have to worry about lining with fabric, because ain't nobody trying to play around with that sewing game. So let's go ahead and just finish out this row of half double crochets. I want to meet you at the end of the row because it does get a little bit tricky once you get to the end to find that final stitch and the spot where it's supposed to be. So let's take a look at that together right now. So I have 2 stitches left to go. So here you can see a very clear post. So I need to go on this side of the post still. So I'll do that. That's going to be my 11th stitch of this row, but I still have 1 more. So you'll notice kind of this big blobby bump at the end of all of your rows. This is our chain 1 space and the post next to the chain 1. So what you want to do is if you kind of pinch like the end, you'll see that there is a post right there. Okay, that's kind of our post. And then this is our chain 1 that we use to turn the row. So we want to go right there into that space. So yarn over, and then you'll stick your hook into that space. Now, if it's hard for you to see, you can literally just take your hook and just put it kind of right next to where that chain 1 space is and just wiggle it, and it'll eventually find its way through. You can then pull up your loop like normal, yarn over, pull through all 3, and that's the end of our second row. Again, once we reach the end, we want to make sure we chain 1 before we turn our work and start going back the other way. We're going to continue this pattern for 15 rows. So I will do this next row with you, and then I will let you finish out the 15 rows by yourself. So again, we've chained 1. We're going to do another half double crochet into that first post. So again, if I just kind of open up my work a little bit, you'll see the 2 spots here. So not these ones here under the V's, but down a little bit further. We're going to go through that first post, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3, and continue all the way down the row until you get to the end. And the end again is going to look very similar to what we just experienced at the end of that second row as well. While I'm finishing out this row, one thing that I also will tell you is the way that I hold my yarn when I'm working with thick yarn is different than the way that I hold it when I'm working with thinner yarn. So typically with thinner yarn, I'm wrapping my yarn like this around my pinky finger, but with thick yarn, it's too much tension. So I tend to just drape between my ring and my pinky finger and then around my forefinger, and that gives me the perfect tension that I need in order to do this bag. Okay, here we are getting to the last couple of stitches. So again, you can see it kind of gets a little funny towards the end here. This is my 11th stitch. And then again, if I kind of pull apart here, you'll see where that post is and then where that turning chain is. So I will just go right in between those 2. And there we have it. And then I'll chain 1 and continue the pattern. So I want you guys to go ahead and continue doing these half double crochets between your posts for 15 rows. And I will meet you at the end of the 15th row. Okay, this is about what your piece should look like once you get to your 15th row. So just a couple of tips if you're kind of losing count. first of all, you should end on the opposite corner from where your initial tail is. That's going to be very important for sewing our sides together. And if you want to know how to count your rows, what you can do is you can just kind of take a close look here and look for these like pretty significant bumps. Each like bump is a row, okay? So our chain counts as our first row, and then you just look at the bumps. So row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Okay, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Also, if you want to know dimensions, the whole piece should be about 9.5 inches by about 8 inches wide. Okay, so if that helps, you can feel free to measure it out and do it that way as well. Now, don't panic if this is all the yarn that you have left, because that's all that you're going to need to finish off this piece. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to make the strap. So this piece is going to fold in half, if you're working education like I do, hamburger style, right? So it's gonna fold in half hamburger style, and that's going to be the end size of your bag. So again, if you want it to be bigger, whether you want it to be taller or wider, you can feel free to add stitches across or continue adding rows if you want it to be a little bit deeper. But for today's tutorial purposes, we're going to leave it where it's at. Now, to make the strap, again, it's like a short little strap. It's just a little handbag, but again, you can add more chains here if you want a longer strap. So what we're going to do now to create the strap is we're going to continue where we left off at the end of that 15th row, and we're going to chain 28. So again, yarn over, pull through the loop on your hook, that's 1. Yarn over, pull through, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 27, 28. Now what you can do is once you get to the end of that chain, you can just kind of set it down next to your bag and see if that's how long that you want it. I know for me, this is the perfect length. So then what we're gonna do is we're actually going to join our sides together. So go ahead and fold your purse hamburger style, and we're going to pick it up and go from the back side, and we're going to go through with our hook through the back of the top corner loop of that 15th row and through our first space here. And it's kind of where it's like our slip stitch space, so I always like to tighten that up a little bit, but right through that slip stitch space. And then we're going to take our yarn, and this gets a little funny, but you want to make sure that that tail kind of stays out of the way. So we're going to take our yarn still attached to what remains of our skein, and we are just going to try to pull through a loop and pull it through. So we are slip stitching our handle onto each side of our bag, and we're slip stitching our bag together. So it's kind of like an all-in-one maneuver. So that's step 1 of creating our handle. Now we're going to work our way back across the handle to end at the top of this side and slip stitch that side together. So the way that we're going to do this is you're just going to want to view the tops of your stitches. So this is what the tops of the stitches look like. You know, it should look like your base chain. This is what the bottom looks like. So if you see these little bumps, you're looking at the bottom, and you're gonna wanna flip it so that you're looking at a top view. It just makes it a little bit easier to work with. And I actually need to pull my yarn through my strap because I did get a little twisted. So feel free to arrange yourself however is gonna work best for you. Now that last chain that we did on our strap, the one that's right next to our hook here, we're ignoring, okay? Remember, we always skip the chain that's right next to our hook. So we're gonna start in the second chain from our hook, and we're just going to slip stitch all the way back along our handle. So we're going to insert our hook into that second chain. We're going to pull a loop through that chain and pull it through the loop on our hook. So again, into the next one, stick your hook, pull that loop through, and then pull it through the loop on your hook. And that's a slip stitch, and we're gonna do that all the way down the handle until we get back to the other side. And this slip stitch is, you know, it's not technically necessary, but I do think that it just gives a nice reinforcement to this handle, makes it a lot thicker and a lot more durable. You could play around with doing different stitches down the handle as well. You know, one thing that you might wanna do is you might wanna stitch around the handle and kind of go like that. It'll give it a different texture. You could also try single crochets, which will give it a little bit of a little bit thicker strap with a ridge on it. So you can really play around with this and make it unique and make it your own. You could also go back the other way so that it's got kind of this nice, like almost braided look to it on both sides. This is really customizable and super up to you. So make it as unique as you are, friends. Okay, I'm getting back down to the base of my handle here. So I am starting to get a little bit twisted. You wanna make sure that you keep the handle as straight as possible. So move the bag if you have to, don't twist the handle because you don't want the handle to get like twisted as you're going. So try to just maneuver the bag so that you're still slip stitching along the top of those handle stitches. So now I am back to the very last chain on my hook, and we are actually going to slip stitch into this chain. So you should have 27 slip stitches along the handle of your bag. I think I misspoke earlier. So now we should be into that first stitch of that row that we ended on. So you're going to want to slip stitch your bag together at this point. So we're going to stick our hook through that first V of the top of our bag. And then again, we're going to want to find the same on the other side of the bag and kind of stick it through there. And this one does get a little bit tricky because this is, again, this was our chain, like our turning chain side. So just get as close as you can to where you think the last stitch is. I think I'm gonna put mine like right here. And then you will slip stitch these sides together. So you're just going to pull through all of the loops on your hook, just like that. Okay, now, this is all the tail that I'm left with. This is a little bit long, so what you're gonna wanna do now is we're actually going to pull our hook out, and we are done with our hook. Now we just have to sew the rest of the bag together. So I'm gonna cut some of this remaining tail off because this is a little bit longer than I need. I'm only gonna need about, you know, 12 to 14 inches, something like that. So I'm just going to cut this off so it's a little more manageable. And then you're just going to pull the rest of that length of yarn through the bag. So at this point, your handle should be attached and the top of your bags should be slip stitched together. So now we just have these openings on either side that we're going to need to sew up. And the nice part is we have this extra yarn on both sides that we're going to use to do the sewing. So I'll start with my beginning tail. This was the tail that was with the slip stitch right at the beginning. Now, if you're using the same yarn as me, it does like to unravel. So to stick it through my needle, what I like to do is I like to give it a little twist. And then I'm gonna take my big needle here, and I like to just, I don't even mess with the ends. I like to just twist the body of the yarn and then just kind of fold it in half and stick it through. But you guys, you do you, okay? Whatever works, because this, yeah, as you can see, this yarn does not like to play when it comes to being sewn. So we just gotta manhandle it just a smidgy here. Okay, I am not having, let's try the end because the middle's not working for me today. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so once you have your needle all hooked up and ready to go, this is not a precise science, friends, okay? So don't overthink this. So we're just going to be moving in an S pattern down the side of the bag to close it up, and then we'll come back up, and we're basically just going to go back and forth until we run out of yarn. Now, I know what you're thinking, that this might look bad. I promise you it will not. It will blend in, okay? So I'm just going to take my yarn, and you can see it's kind of behind my strap. So I'm going to actually just work it through my strap like this, just to get it down to the start of the purse. And then I'm just going to stick it through the stitches and pull back and forth And you'll notice that the bumps should kind of line up together. So I try to go through the bumps that are aligned on either side and just go back and forth and back and forth. But like I said, this is not a precise science, okay? It's gonna look fine when you finish. I absolutely promise, guarantee, cross my heart. Okay, so don't spend a lot of time on this. This is like the least precise part of the process. Just have fun with it. We're just trying to get our purse to stay together on either side. Okay, now I do always kind of go through the base here as well, just to make sure that we are holding the bottom together. I don't like to have any little holes on the bottom of my bags. Okay, now you can see I do still have some spaces that are open, so that's why I do like to work my way back up with whatever yarn remains. And I kind of try to go into different spots than I did the first time around, just to make sure that everything is super secure, so that I don't have any holes, so nothing's gonna fall out of my purse when I am using it at my parties and all that fun stuff. Okay, now when I start to get down to not a whole lot of tail left for this yarn, which I am getting pretty close, okay, I'm gonna do maybe one more stitch and then I'll show you what I do here. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do, that I only have a little tiny bit left, is I am going to kind of just weave it down and through in order to hide this tail. And you can see that second pass really did close up a lot of those gaps that I had. Okay, so for this final pass, I'm just gonna kind of take it and I'm gonna stick it in and into the inside of my purse, okay? And then I'm just going to go through some random stitches in here, okay? And just pull it down with me. Now what I do like to do is when it gets this short, it's kind of hard to maneuver the needle. So what I'll do is I'll stick the needle through a couple of stitches first, like thus. And then I'll leave the needle kind of sticking in, and then I'll rethread and just pull it through. And this is probably gonna be all that I'm gonna be able to get out of this tail. So we'll pull it through. A nice little tug so it's secure, and then you can just clip off whatever remains. Careful not to clip your bag. Okay, and there we have sewn up the first side of our bag. Look at that, gorgeous. So we're going to do the exact same thing to the other side as well. So for this side, since I do have a little more to play with, we're going to probably sew up and down the sides a couple of times. So again, I'm gonna make sure everything's lined up, and then I'm just going to start with my S stitch. Now, I don't actually know what this stitch is called, so if you guys know and wanna drop it in the comments so that we can all learn together, that would be excellent. I just do it. Sometimes I just do things and I don't know what they're called. Like, honestly, I'm sure the half double crochet stitch that we did for the bag, you know, between the front posts has a name, and I'm just not sure what it is. I think it's, you know, front post half double crochet, but I really don't know. I have no idea. I might have to Google it before I write the pattern out for this, but there it is. Okay, so again, just kind of going through, over and around. I like to go through that bottom, make sure that's really secure, and then I'm gonna go back up. Now I'm back up at the top, so I am going to, again, like I did with the last piece, just thread it through here, go on the inside of my bag and weave it in a little bit through some of the stitches. I'm going to bring it down a little bit further than the last one since I have a little bit more to play with. And the more you guys kind of weave these ends in, the more secure your bag's gonna be, but honestly, these bags are pretty sturdy little things, so you really shouldn't have to worry about them at all. Okay, I'm gonna call that good, so I'm gonna cut this tail off. And there we have our purse sewn together, our little handbag, and we just have to put the finishing touches on it now. Now, it's time to play with fire. If you guys are using the same yarn that I'm using, you may have noticed as you were crocheting all of these little fuzzies that appear, and hopefully you can see this. Hopefully the camera's kind of picking it up, but this yarn is super, super fuzzy. What we can use our lighter for is we can use our lighter to get rid of all of these fuzzies. So when we're using a lighter on crochet products, and this can be used, this technique can be used on other crochet products as well. Just be careful of the type of yarn that you're using it with. I think typically acrylic yarn is the only yarn that you're gonna wanna do this with. So what I like to do is we're just going to pass the flame gently over the surface of the crochet item, and you'll see those fuzzies disappear. So I'll try to get a good camera view of this for you. So you're gonna turn it on, and you just wanna very lightly brush the flame over the piece, and you'll see those fuzzies kind of just disappear, and it's pretty awesome. You don't wanna hold it over too long, otherwise your yarn will get burnt, especially if you're working with white yarn. It does show up pretty clearly if you singe it a little too much, okay, but I like to just do this over the outside of my piece to get rid of all of my fuzzies that appeared during the sewing process and that got loosened during the process of putting the bag together. And I do like to just kind of run my hand over it because sometimes I do get little like char pieces. But this does, again, this is not a necessary step, but it does just give your bag a more finished look to it. Especially around the handle area. The handle tends to get really fuzzy. And as you guys wear your bag and use your bag, if you notice that the fuzzies are kind of starting to come back, you can use this technique to get rid of those fuzzies again. So you can just kind of run your flame over your bag again. It'll get rid of those fuzzies for you. So that, my friends, is what the flame is for. Okay, now that we have that step done, we're going to finish off the details of our bag. So the first thing that we're gonna wanna do is we are gonna wanna attach our glam button on the outside of the bag. So you are gonna wanna take that spare yarn or string or embroidery floss that you have, and I have a little piece cut here for the button, and we're going to wanna take our smaller needle and just kind of thread it up. Once you have your needle threaded, you're just going to want to set your glam buttons wherever you want them. So I just try to set it as close to the middle as I can get it. I usually just eyeball it, but if you want, you could count stitches or you could measure. You know, if I take out my measuring tape, that is, yep, just perfectly centered. So that looks good right there. And then you'll just sew your button on. So I usually just hold it in place. And I like to stick my needle through the back, okay, like right about in the center of where the button is, and leave a tail. So leave a little tail sticking out the back, and then we'll stick it through the center of that button, okay, just to hook it. And I will actually hook this on a couple of times. So I'm just going to come kind of halfway through a couple of the stitches, back out the other side, and then I'm going to go back through the center of the button just so that it has a little reinforcement here. And I'm gonna pull it tight so we're not gonna be able to see that piece anymore. And then once it's nice and tight, I'm going to stick my needle back through the back side of the purse. And then I am just going to triple knot these two pieces of string or yarn or whatever you're using together to make sure that button is super, super secure. And we want to make sure to put the button on first because we're going to put our clasp right over top of the back of that button. So that's why we put the bling button on first. Okay, once that's nice and secure, you can dab it with a little super glue if you don't trust it, but I have done this long enough where I trust mine. I think it'll be good to go. And there you have it. You could honestly just finish your bag here if you don't want it to shut together and clasp together, but if you want to sew on your clasp, you should have that now. And you're just gonna wanna take it apart. Now, the key here is making sure that you sew this on the right way. Because the first time that I did it, I sewed it on backwards. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so if these are the parts that have to pin together, then this is the side you want to sew, and this is the side that you want to sew towards the bag. So I'm gonna start with this piece. And I'm just gonna put this up against the back of my button. So it'll be almost like the button is kind of acting as the clasp, right? And I'm gonna take my needle here. Let me turn this so that we have a good angle. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I like to start I look for the closest crochet stitch, and I actually stick it kind of underneath that stitch. So you'll see me going under that stitch, and then I'm gonna come up and through the closest opening on that button. Again here, I'm gonna leave a tail because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sew around this button, come out the same stitch, and then I'll tie my knot over here and I'll be able to kind of tuck it underneath that stitch. So what I like to do is I just like to go over the top. I go over and under, so then I'll kind of pop it out near where I know that next opening is. Just like that. And then I put my needle up through the next opening, pull it kind of tight, go down, pop it up where close to the next opening-ish. Okay, not an exact science. Trust me, it'll come together. Up through the opening and down and back up. And then what I like to do is I like to go the opposite way. Okay, so you'll see I have like 3 lines of where I've sewn. Now I'm gonna go back up the same opening that I first went through, but now I'm gonna reverse and go back the other way. So now I'll go down this one, and this is where it gets tricky, is when you start getting it on pretty tight. So sometimes what I have to do, there we go, is since I'm kind of far away, I'll actually go back underneath that stitch a little bit and then back up like that. And then down and up. Okay, and then this is going to be my very last stitch that I do. So I'm going to go down, and then I'm going to stick it all the way through that first stitch and come out back by that tail that I left. I'm going to pull it tight, remove my needle, and then this is where I'm going to triple knot my button on. Just like this. And you'll see that the knot kind of gets hidden behind that stitch there. 2 and 3. And then I'm going to just snip these tails off. Just like that. Use my needle to kind of shove the knot under that stitch if needed. And voila, I have attached that side of the button. Now I'm going to do the other side and my bag will be completely finished. Now for doing the other side, you want to be really careful because you want to line up your button exactly. So I actually like to snap the other side on. So once you have the other side snapped on, what I like to do is I like to just close my bag exactly how I'm going to want it to be closed. Okay, so I try to line everything up. And then what I'll do is I am going to hold the side that I'm sewing on and just kind of stick my fingers in there and pull apart the button while holding it very securely in the exact space that I want it to be sewn on. Then I'm gonna grab my threaded needle and I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did to the first side. So I'm going to stick it under a nearby stitch and up and out one of the holes while still holding securely. I'm gonna leave a little tail for tying, and then I'm just going to start working my way through this button. Once you get that first stitch in, you don't really have to hold it anymore because that first stitch will kind of hold it into place for you. So then you can kind of put it down and start just sewing it on like you normally would. And once you have finished sewing on both sides, give it a snap and enjoy your new beautifully crafted holiday handbag.